out of Sacramento, California.
Woo! What you gonna do?
Better. Stronger.
Son of a bitch.
Faster.
Oh, yeah!
Is this on? Is this thing on?
You're lit like a...
Bert and Tom. Tom and Bert. Yeah. They talked about nothing, and it was great, though.
Chrysler, listen, man. God bless him. He is fun and funny. Those giggle outbursts, they gotta go. I don't think those are real. Do you think those are real, or do you think he's hamming it up?
I think it's real. I think he's really like that. In real life, like, you know how he was saying, like, you're a lot? I think he's a lot. I think he's a lot to handle. I think that if you were friends with him,
Right.
Okay, so I would fucking love to meet him. I would die to meet Bert Kreischer. I think he's hilarious. But I think after 3 days, I'd be like, this fucking guy. Like, if he started coming to the gym and training with us, I think I could put up with him for about 3 days. Then I'd be like, you know what? Bert's got to go. He's too much. Like, I can't handle him.
I mean, he is...
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
some people are too much. They like, he says that he's like that all the time.
Right.
And so it might get to be much on
He
you.
operates as this. He is the center of his universe.
It seems like if you hung out with him, Mark and I have friends like this. We call them kidnappers. So my friend Horseshoe's like this. Big Will is like this. Hey, bro, I'll come pick you up. Like, be Horseshoe. You're stuck with him all fucking day. You are not getting away from him. Like, if he's driving, you're not getting away from it. Like, hey, man, can you drop me back in my car? Because we just got to run to this one place first. You know, and then you're stuck with them for like 6 more hours. So, you know the movie The Program?
Yes. Uh-huh.
When I was in college, we should close that door there.
Yeah.
We should start recording because this is all good. But when I was going to USC, and I was training at Gold's Gym in Venice, and we watched The Program, and we must have seen The Program 20 times in the theater. We just kept going to see it because there's nothing else to do when you're in college, and you're bored. So we went to see The Program a bunch, me and my friends, because we loved it. And we loved Latimer, the steroid, character. And so I'm like, man, it'd be awesome to meet Latimer. What a great thing that would be. Next thing you know, Latimer's in my car with me. I'm driving him all over Venice. He's smoking pot like crazy. And back then I was like totally against marijuana. And he'd be like smoking pot in my car. He'd be making me go to places so that he could buy weed. And back then weed wasn't legal. It was like illegal. And I was like a young kid. So I was like really, really like nervous about driving around with him everywhere. And he made me like, he was an awesome friend. Don't get me wrong. He was awesome to hang out with. But he was too much. He was like, I can't, like, next thing you know, we're hanging out with the drummer of Guns N' Roses in Venice Beach.
Really?
We're hanging out with Steven Adler after he got kicked out of the band.
Wow.
Because he was doing too many drugs. And I'm hanging out with Latimer. But what was great is that he was trying to get into pro wrestling. So Latimer would hang out with me and Mark and Mad Dog and stuff like that. And we would go to the wrestling matches, the WWE matches. And he was so big. He's like 6'4", 6'5", and he's jacked, right? So we would pull up to the Anaheim Pond in, LA area. And we pull up and he'd go around back. And I'm like, where are we going? Just go around back. I'm like, yeah, but we have tickets. We have to go into the front. Go around the back. I'm like, okay, fine. So I go around the back and he's like, pull up to this security guy. I'm like, that's where the wrestler's going. He's like, I know. And he's like kind of mad at me. I'm like, what are we doing? And he goes, wrestler's entrance. And they say, oh, right. They look at him and they go, oh, it's right here, sir. And they move the cones out of the way. And I'm like, where am I going? He's like, you're going down the ramp.
Really?
And I'm like, we're parking back here? He goes, yeah, we're just going to walk in. He's like, hey, I know all these guys. And we walk in and Triple H is like, hey, what's up, man? And like, he knows.
He did really know.
Yeah, he like they all knew him from the movies.
Oh.
But his move was to wear the Latimer jersey to the wrestling event so everybody knew who he was, And he'd walk around all jacked. And it was hilarious, and he knew everybody. And, for a while, we thought he was going to be a big wrestling superstar, and he probably should have been. And to be honest with you, if you talk to him like nowadays today, he'd probably tell you that he shot himself in the foot because he was too much. He was too much to deal with for people. He was trying to actually, back when they weren't making many comic book movies, he was chasing down Joel Silver, who's the biggest producer in the history of Hollywood. Joel Silver produced Die Hard. And he kept calling Joel Silver's office saying, like, you got to put me as Lobo. There was this character, Lobo.
I know who Lobo is.
I'm not very familiar with too many comic books, but
right.
he dressed up like Lobo. If you probably look it up, like Andrew Bernarski is Lobo. I'm sure there's like pictures somewhere of it. But he looked just like him and he looked awesome. And he kept trying to push them to make that movie. Now that it's 20 years later, they probably will make that movie. And obviously they're not going to pick him because he's too old, but he did look pretty awesome. Yeah, it's Bernarski. It's Byrna, like B something like that. Something like more like that. Yeah. Is there pictures?
Oh, look what he did.
He looks awesome as Lobo. Like, don't get me wrong, and he's actually a great actor. And he's still a friend of ours. I'm just saying, like, he's a little much as far as like when you're friends with him, it takes a lot of energy because you got to be ready to do whatever he wants to do, you know? So that's how I feel about Bert Kreischer, the same thing. Like, it would probably take a lot of energy, but I would still love him. Like, he's still great. You know?
I mean, cannot deny, like, I don't think he's like the funniest. I don't think he's the funniest comedian. I think he's the funnest.
He's the funnest comedian. Like, you can tell. So, like, Tom Segura, he might be the funniest comedian alive, in my opinion. And Tom Segura can't even hang with him on their own podcast. He's like, oh my God, like, Bert, come on. You know, like, you're too much. You know, he tells him all the time. And then they had that podcast last week where he's like, am I a lot? And Tom's like, yes, you're a lot. So even like his best friend is telling him, like, you're a lot to deal with, which isn't so bad. But when you're trying to get, I guess, somebody to help you lose weight, help you with your career, things like that, you have to be able to be cognizant of if you're too much. Because you don't want to be too much on the people that want to help you, because you don't want it to backfire, you know?
Some people are just extra, like high maintenance people, right?
Yeah.
They just are.
And it might not be high maintenance in a way that you picture. Like, he might not require a lot of money, but he might require a lot of energy, you know? Yeah. And some people are a lot in the way that they require money. Like, you have some friends where you just have to accept that they're never going to have any money to do anything, and you always are going to have to pay. Yeah. I think my brother probably feels like that about me, so he just deals with it and just pays every time.
Right.
But yeah, I think, you know, we have to be cognizant of if you're too much on somebody, you know?
Yeah, I sometimes worry if, like, when I get manicky, I sometimes worry, am I too much on people? Because, like, I kind of.
You're like a 4 text in a row guy every once in a while. Like, but I'm the same way. So I never go like, oh, Russell, you know, you'll never hear me be like, oh, Russell, he's just too much on me, because I'm kind of too much on people too.
So whenever you get in a zone where you're chronically interrupting, I always say to myself, Russell, this is you, like 9/10 of the time out there with everybody you interact with.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when Chris has a stream of thought, he's just in the zone. He wants to let this stuff go. I can completely relate to that. And I just enjoy it, because I'm like, oh, dude, he wants to say, he's got some shit he wants to get off his chest, but I bet you it's some really interesting shit. I'm just going to let him go with it. I want to see what Chris has to say right now.
Yeah. And I feel like, but Bert Kreischer explained this great. Do you want me talking, or do you want my wife talking? And he gave an example of, like, let me tell you a story. He tells this whole story about going to a hospital and like meeting this woman, and it was amazing. Like, the thing that happened was amazing, and it ended up being Whitney Houston. And he's like, Leanne will tell the story, but like, oh, I ever tell you when we met Whitney Houston? And it's like, she takes all the surprise and all the fun out of it. So at the same time, as a storyteller of like what I do, a lot of times, like, I want to be the guy telling the story.
Do you buy into the philosophy? Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Like, how much bend will you put on a story?
Like, sometimes I'm like, oh, as the story's developing in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna add this little thing in, you know. But I've noticed, I did a podcast with my buddy Mike Ryan, where a couple of things that I noticed were like probably embellishments, and they were about like The Rock. And I'm thinking, like, he's kind of jumping the shark here, because, like, if he just told the truest version of that story, it might be a little bit like it's way more believable, you know? So as long as you got to be careful not to like jump the shark on the story, you know, because the story was funny enough on its own. Like Mike Ryan's we're going to have him on this podcast. He's got some phenomenal stories. And then sometimes the embellishment gets to be a little bit like, I don't know, you know, like where you can tell. So you got to be careful if you're, you know, bending the truth a little bit.
You know, a lot of the whole Bert coming out as fat, like, you know, like, I mean, Bert is a fat guy. He's an athletic fat guy, right? Semi-athletic, right? He can jog a little, run a little, and can hit a tennis ball pretty good, apparently, right? But like a lot of what he says, like as a fat guy, like I resonate with.
Yeah.
Like I really do.
I love the term.
Living in the excesses that he talks about.
I love the term that Tim Dillon came out with, fat forward. Like I'm a fat forward thinker.
Fat forward.
Like the future is in fat, and he's fat forward thinking because they'll say that people are fashion forward. You know, like that guy's fashion forward. Like he's, you know, Kanye West is fashion forward. He's the guy that's setting the trends. So Tim Dillon made up like he's fat forward. He's setting the trend of being fat.
What do you think about some of like the health influencers of like our time and social media that are credible, educated people that are sort of like intentionally trying to counterbalance that because they're not necessarily, I think, at least intentionally effort to like fat shame people, but they also are trying to like squash that whole like fat celebration that some people are wanting to have.
I think certain people do it in better ways than others. You know, for example, like I'm a big fan of most of the stuff Greg Doucette says, but I do think sometimes he's a little bit fat shamey-ish, you know, but I get it because he's coming from like a bodybuilder standpoint. And I know like Lane Norton, he kind of crushes a lot of hopes and dreams sometimes on people. But I think he handles it a little bit better in a way of putting things into context. So it just depends. I mean, do you have a specific example? Okay, so does anybody offend you in the way that they present their weight loss stuff?
I mean, okay, so to say I am not in the current state of offendedness right now, but I've been offended in the past before, here or there, the way certain like, you know, health celebrities.
Well, Greg Doucette will come out as a meme if you don't have abs, you're fat. And if you see that meme, it could be insulting. But when you actually hear what he says and he explains it, it's not insulting at all. It's like, oh, I get it.
Yeah,
it's totally in context.
I mean, there is an effort right now to, like, and again, I don't like to sit in any extreme, but there's an effort right now to celebrate fatness. Like, I mean, like even like when I open up TikTok and dude, I'm a fatty fat. I don't want to be a fatty fat. But when I open up TikTok right now, I think there's this Nike commercial that comes up with two, you know, really, it's just, you know, with no disrespect to two really heavy women in their active wear and celebrating that they're trying to get active in Nike and they're pushing towards that market. And I mean, why not?
It really bothers me because all I wear is Lululemon pretty much. Lululemon Viore. And they would never, ever in a million years use somebody like me as a model, but they'll use some like heavy set girl who never has worked out as like their model. You know what I mean? And so to me, I'm like, what about the tweeners like me that wear your stuff? I'm not represented. It's like extreme. It's either they're extremely ripped or they're like completely out of shape.
Right.
And there is no real in-between guy ever.
And I want to preface this, like, I mean, obviously, dude, I'm like an obese guy, obviously. Like, I want to have gym clothes to work out in.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that. And I want to, like, that's the whole thing. Like even, dude, sometimes I come into Mark's gym, and even though everyone's been everything but kind, you just get self-conscious. Like, I see Dr. Sean Baker and Stan Efferding right over there in the corner, and I'm thinking, I mean, and, you know, it's like, you can't help but to almost feel a little shaded in their brightness.
Yeah.
They shine so bright health-wise, you feel dark, you know, even if you're there trying to get it.
I would say they're a good example. Like Dr. Baker may sometimes come off a little brash on some of the things he says.
You know, we've talked about that. I mean,
especially towards like the vegan crowd, but we need him as a leader.
At one time, you know, I've had open criticisms of Dr. Baker, but I've also attempted to talk to Dr. Baker about it. And me being nobody amoeba, if anything, a friend of a friend,
Sure.
if anything, at the very most, which I don't even know he was necessarily even cognitive of that when we exchanged messages. But I just said, in the nicest terms, you're doing good work. I'm a big fan of yours. Some of the stuff you come across just seems like, it just seems like fat shaming to me. When I understand your motive is probably you're just trying to debunk the theory of fat celebration,
You're
but
also
it sometimes it just seems like mean-spirited, some of this stuff. And that was years or two ago. And the reality is, what I did, and that's why it's kind of weird. I can tell you kind of wanted to kind of cue it up, so I'm going to go down this road with you. But I just stopped following. In fact, I didn't even stop following. I think I muted him.
Mhm.
Like, not out of disrespect, but out of like, why? If he's got a message he's out there, I know his message is good, but he's also why would I'm not going to participate in that
You're
conversation.
putting it, if you don't like it, you actually did the right thing. Because I honestly, I posted about this the other day. I think Dr. Sean Baker might be the smartest guy that we know in the entire fitness industry. And I know that that's a shock to a lot of people, especially people that think he's just a meathead. The guy can speak several languages. Like, he's trying to learn Portuguese right now just because he does jujitsu. Right. And I'm like, isn't that impossible? Like, isn't that really hard? I mean, you're 55 years old. He's like, nah, I mean, I can memorize anything. That's how I got through medical school. I just memorized everything. And you're like, memorized everything about like anatomy? I mean, these are big, complex topics, things that he's tackling, like learning a new language, learning anatomy of the human body, learning, all the stuff you have to learn in medical school. And I think that rather than like just completely discounting him, you went about it the right way. Like, if you want his information, you can go seek it out. He exists. But if sometimes it bothers you, you shut it off. You shut off the running faucet,
right?
That might be bothering you. And then that if you want his information, you can go to his videos. But I could tell you this also, and this is the hard part about these influencers and these different people, because I'm sure a lot of them are the same way. If you sat with Dr. Baker and you had dinner with him and it was one-on-one, you would have the most fantastic conversation with him. You would leave there going, like, man, this guy's brilliant. And you'd probably be also, more on board with like what he's doing, because when he starts explaining to why he's the way he is, he's seen all these people, he's seen all these people getting their feet amputated from type 2 diabetes. He's seen the devastation that this brings to a lot of people. And so he's a little bit more adamant about like, hey, we got to stop this. We can't glorify.
He's a natural advocate. You know what I mean? I believe he does really good work in the universe. He's fighting some, is this the right word, subversive forces out there, right? I mean, I think there are some profit driven and some clout driven movements in like Western society right now that I think he is really efforting and making a serious dent in, like, staying rational. I mean, when you listen to him talk, he doesn't, if he says, if you want to have some vegetables and fruit, if you want to eat healthy, and eating healthy includes vegetables and fruit, sure, why not? But what he's really saying is, but I will say that this red meat, this is a staple of a healthy diet, and there are forces out there trying to get rid of it for profit.
Sean and I talked about it. Yeah, Sean and I talked about it in a way that's like, so going back to, it's World Carnivore Month, and the more that you go towards just meat and water, in my opinion, for me, I should say, the more I go towards meat and water, and he said the same thing, the healthier he feels and the healthier he gets. And I feel the same exact way. The more complexities I add into my diet, every little thing that I add in is another step away from where I feel great. So I do understand that. And I do understand that a lot of people don't feel great without carbohydrates. So they might be in a different boat where their diet might be steak and potatoes and some vegetables and some fruits, right? And I'm fine with that.
Right? White rice, right? I mean, he talks about, there's another, just a titan. I was trying to describe him to my wife. I was like, he's 10 out of 10. And in all 10 categories.
Yeah.
Perfect genetics, perfect training, perfect supplementation, perfect. You know, this is what the male body can get to if everything is done 10 out of 10 across the board.
Let's be honest, he's also enhanced, right?
That's one of the 10s.
Yeah.
He's 10 out of 10 on perfect.
He's also enhanced, and he'll utilize things like Botox and different other things to make him look younger, which is fine. I'm totally fine with that. I have plenty of women that I'm friends with that use Botox. It's like I'm fine with it all. But I'm just saying you have to put those things into your consideration when you're thinking like, well, that guy looks perfect. Well, there's a lot that goes into it. It's like seeing a hot girl and be like, well, she's perfect. Well, how much time goes into that? Right. A lot of time goes into Stan, Right. And maybe that's why Dr. Baker's message is like a little bit, he's like more rough around the edges kind of guy that's like, yeah, I just eat meat. And he's not getting Botox and taking steroids and doing these things. So it's like, it's interesting, the dichotomy between
very interesting
the both of them, and how Dr. Baker, when you talk to him about steroids, he's fine with it. He's like, I'm totally fine. Like, I know all three of you guys use them, to me, Mark and Stan. Like, I'm completely fine with it. Like, for me, I've never felt the need to do that. Could I be more muscular? Yes. Could I be bigger? Yes. Could I be leaner with it? Yes. But I just don't feel like I need it. And that's great. I love people being themselves.
Isn't he sort of like the poster boy for, just hold on one second. This might not make sense and it might be genius. Dr. Sean seems like the poster boy for TRT. Like, this is exactly a great case of when it's not needed.
Yeah.
Why would this guy get TRT? I mean, could he be enhanced to some degree? Maybe, probably, yes, right?
You should see
there's no real need for it. There's no medical need. And
you
this
should
is what TRT is supposed to be.
You should see the messages I get about steroids. And then the conversation I had with Smokey, who, Smokey's like sort of the head of our powerlifting team here. And the conversation I had with him, because he works for Merrick Health, and he himself has just started testosterone replacement therapy, and he came up to Mark the other day and was talking to him about like, it's not all it's like I thought I was going to be in way better shape. It's not all it's cracked up to be, kind of thing. And I think that's a great realization to have when you actually take testosterone. Your thoughts on it will be completely different. Like, you don't take it and then overnight you're all of a sudden jacked and shredded. And that's what the internet thinks. Like, Instagram thinks like, oh, this guy just took steroids and he got shredded. Mark put up a great post the other day and he says, this is me when I was abusing PEDs, and he was about 330 pounds. And then he's like, this is me on a hormone replacement dose, and he's shredded, and it's like now. And he's like, you see, like, I was abusing steroids on the left and I looked horrible. And I was using steroids on the right and I look completely different and single digit body fat. No, well, that's using steroids. It's the same drug.
Do you not consider the dosage relevant in that terminology?
So, testosterone replacement therapy would be probably 100 to 200, well, anywhere from 0 to 200 milligrams of testosterone a month, I would say, would be a hormone replacement dose that'll get you up to replacing your own hormones. Anything over that, 300, 400, 500. Mark was using over 1,000 a week. Yeah. And when you're using over 1,000 a week, I mean, that's all Mark was really a testosterone guy, where he really liked testosterone. So he took some other things on top, like halo testing, which makes you a little more aggressive. And he took some things on top of testosterone, but mainly it was just large doses of testosterone and not that much, you're going to get a lot bigger. You're going to be able to put on a lot more muscle, but there's also a lot of side effects that come with that. You'll definitely be a lot stronger, but you're going to hold a lot more water. There's a lot of things that come along with it that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. I think people just think that steroids are automatically a magic pill.
And weren't we talking about this maybe last week? Some quote unquote steroids are a lot less risk aversive and some are more, right?
Sure. I think that anybody in the entire world can get away with taking a little bit of anabolics, right? I think anybody can take it and it can kind of go, point where it's helping them, but it goes unnoticed as far as side effects goes. And that's usually up to it's actually up, the studies actually say up to 600 milligrams. But I feel like personally, I've personally gone up to about 400 milligrams, and I have some serious side effects at 400 milligrams. The side effect that I get the most, that's a weird one, that is my red blood cell count goes up too high, and then my legs just fill up with blood, and I can't even walk around the block. So what good is being jacked up on testosterone when I can't walk around the block? So for me, I have a self-limiting governor on how much testosterone I can personally take. And I've even lowered the dose to 100 milligrams, about 100 milligrams a week, maybe up to like 150. But I don't take nearly as much as I did when I was kind of messing around and trying to figure it out before, when I wasn't going to a doctor, you know?
Now, is that hemoglobins? Is that like hemoglobin count when you look at your lab results?
Yeah. Well, basically, it's not even that. Like, it shows up in the labs, but the main thing is I can actually feel it. Okay. You know, and I think that's an important thing about all of this is like, how do you feel? You know, and if you don't feel good, you need to get your testosterone levels checked. And if you're on testosterone and you don't feel good, you have to figure out, am I taking too much? Am I taking too little? You know, where is that fine line? You know,
I do follow-up labs tomorrow morning.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Good. How have your labs been so far?
So far, I think they've been healthy. There's been no major adjustments made. If anything, he went up. I went from 150 a week to 170 from the last one. I'm just kind of curious what he'll say today. Or not today, but
when you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we did have a great conversation with Stan about something we were talking about the other day, which is vitamin D. And I think Stan, Mark, Dr. Baker, and I are all in agreement on this because we all talked about it. We feel that your health drives how your body utilizes, stores, and keeps your vitamin D levels high. And I think the general public's thought is that, oh, you need to supplement with vitamin D, right? And we also have found that if your vitamin D levels are around like 40 and higher, that 40 and higher doesn't make any difference. Like I told Stan mine was 80, and Stan's response to it, because I thought like he's gonna be like, oh, that's good. He was like, that's cool, but like we've really found that there's no benefit of it being over 40. There's really no benefit. Like having a good vitamin D level up to like 40 is good, but then anything over that, he's like, I used to stress to people to get their vitamin D level as high as possible too. But there's side effects that come with that. When you take a lot of vitamin D in pill form, it raises your calcium. Calcium is what blocks our blood vessels, our arteries and stuff like that. So you don't want a lot of calcium floating around in your body. So taking these massive loads of vitamin D, you'll hear people say like, I've taken 50,000 IUs a day. And you're like, I don't know if that's that good. I think and in all the studies I've read, the vitamin D, when you take a lot of it, I think your body just wastes it. But when you take like the right amount, which is probably about a 5,000 IU tablet a day, and that's it. When you take the right amount, your body actually uses a lot of that. But then after a certain amount that you take, like I think the first, say 5,000 IUs you take, you'll absorb a lot of that. But then like once you start taking it after that, your body just stops absorbing it, stops using it in the right way, and turns it into like calcium. I don't know if I'm not a doctor again. I don't know if it turns it into calcium, but I know it definitely raises your calcium level. So I warn people like, hey, just use vitamin D as directed and you'll probably be fine. Get some sun and use it as directed. Like take one capsule.
That seems so rational to me. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I misrepresented my opinion of it. I never thought it was like a miracle drug or a miracle vitamin.
I didn't think that you did, but I'm thinking that when you say, do you need to take any, like when you ask people, do you need to take any supplements? People always rush to that. Well, you got to take vitamin D. Right. And it's like, no, you don't really necessarily have to. You can eat eggs and you can eat seafood and get some vitamin D, but it is hard to get from your diet. Vitamin D and magnesium are the two things that are kind of difficult to get from your diet. So if you're using like Element or Keto Vitals or some sort of electrolyte, what's the other one? Liquid IV or something. Yeah. If you're using some sort of electrolyte thing, then your magnesium's probably okay.
Gatorade?
Gatorade's just too low. It would be, Gatorade would be great. I was telling Element, Rob Wolf and Tyler Cartwright and those guys, I told them a long time ago, actually, like, I feel like you guys need, and I know this is impossible to do. This is a big ask. They need to make element in, so you can buy it at a gas station already made. Because first of all, it's delicious,
form, ready to roll,
delicious, right? But second of all, like if I rolled into a gas station, they always had Element. I would buy it every time. You know, I would be the sucker that goes and gets, because it's something that it's a supplement that can be really, really beneficial because it's got sodium, potassium, magnesium in it, and in the right ratios. Whereas like you buy a Gatorade, it's just like a really, really weak, watered down version of that.
Seems like that would be a good partnership, right? If Gatorade could get like the element
Gatorade with Element, or Gatorade Element
for the most effective dose of this, and with their distribution.
You think with their distribution, they could sell the hell out of it to athletes, and they might just be thinking like, "Hey, we're going to do that on our own." I know Gatorade has made some great strides lately. Like they have a protein drink that's not too bad. You know, it's got 10 grams of whey protein in it. It's pretty good. They might keep going in that route, and you know, I would like to see things kind of move in that direction so that we have some.
Yeah, you know, they initially claimed to be like the athlete's drink, but then it just sort of turned into like the kids picnic drink.
And now
you know
it's
what I mean?
Now it's kind of turned into like Capri Sun almost.
Yeah, it's like a kid's drink at the picnic. If you're having a birthday party, get a bunch of little Gatorades for the kids to drink.
You know, one of the worst things people can do for their body in general is drink sugar. Whether it's Gatorade, whether it's Pepsi, whether it's Mountain Dew, any of that shit, it's terrible for you because the human body has not evolved to process sugar in those big amounts. And I honestly think that if you were to do one thing in the American diet, and that would be to like get rid of all soda, all sugar, let's just say not soda, so not make soda the bad guy because not the bad guy, all sugary drinks, you just get rid of them. I think that would do more for our country than almost anything. That's crazy to say, but if you think about how many people are dumping sugar down their throat all the time and not understanding how it's causing obesity because the thing is, most people don't take in too much fructose in their normal daily life, but they do when they drink those drinks. They take in too much fructose.
Right.
You know, and fructose could be bad, you know, in not by itself, but in big amounts can be like really hard on your liver and just hard on your system. And I think that getting rid of those sugary drinks is the number one thing people can do. Like if you have that in your diet already and you can just make one sacrifice in your life, it's like get rid of those drinks, you know, over vegetable oil, over not eating flour, you know, over all that thing. I think the sugary drinks are the things that spike the blood sugar the most and cause a cascade of issues.
Yeah, that would be like the first effort, right? Do this. Get rid of all the sugary drinks. Get rid of the juices for your kids. Get rid of the soda in the back of the fridge. Get rid of the smoothies.
Mark and I
thought smoothies were healthy.
Yeah.
Remember when Jamba Juice was like what?
Oh yeah. Mark and I were just talking about this the other day. You can't make junk food out of animals. It's just impossible. You could take everything from an animal, combine it together, and eat it, and you cannot have anything that the human body cannot absorb the vitamins from or eat. You know, like as long as you can actually eat it, like you're not going to eat a bone, but like as long as it's something that's actually an edible part of the animal, and you eat that, it's going to cause a health benefit, right? Like you look at now when you take that healthy animal fat, protein, whatever you're eating, and there's also like really no carbs in animals. There's like no carbohydrate, right? So you can't really make junk food without plants. Like you can make junk food out of like, yeah, you could have a burger and that could be bad for you, but what do you need? You need the bun and the mayonnaise for it to be bad. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from plants.
Wow.
You cannot make junk food.
Interesting take.
Yeah, you cannot make junk food out of animals. So if you stuck to only animal foods and people did that, what would happen? Right? And I'm not saying that people should do that, but we should be aware of that. Like, well, why are people so overweight and obese in our country?
Could you reduce that to grains? If you took grains out of it?
Yeah.
Sugar's a grain, yes?
Yeah. Sugar cane, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, if you just took away grains,
if you said, I mean, some people
rice,
some people
sugar.
do say, like Vinny Tortorich is a good friend of mine. He has 2 documentaries, and if you haven't seen them, they're great to watch. It's called Fat and Fat 2. And they're really simple documentaries, but I give him a lot of credit for doing this. He basically set up a room in his house that's like this. Like he set up a chair and he's just talking, and that's his documentary. It's like, it's literally him giving you a speech like I'm giving right now with a bunch of stuff cut in. And at first I'm like, what a cheap way to make a documentary. I mean, I traveled all over the world to do it, but he's got it out and it's on, it's actually real. It's actually good. It's well done, but it's actually out and it's out there and it's helping people. So it's better to do that than to do what I'm doing and not do it because you don't think it's good enough.
I'll tell you. I mean,
so Fat and Fat 2 by Vinny Tortorich are really good films for people to watch, where he explains his diet, which is no grain, no sugar.
I know World Carnivore Month is sort of the theme of the moment, but that Greg Douchet movie video that he released this morning. So
you're just like him. You like to say people's names wrong.
I can't
Greg
say
Douchet.
Greg what?
Greg Doucet.
Doucet. Hey, Greg.
He does it. Coach Greg though. He does it.
Greg to me. I don't care what his last name is.
Coach Greg messes up everybody.
That video he put out this morning was just such like almost like a thesis of here's just a very rational, common sense baseline approach to losing some weight. Be 100-calorie deficit every day. Do the circle book. All that sort of stuff. And I was like. And Rebecca was, hanging out with me this morning, and I was like, "Yeah, let's put this on. I'll see what, I'll play this and see what she thinks." She was like, "Oh, this is really good." We talked about protein goals. It was really a good video. Coach
Greg is great, but what Mark and I discussed this morning is that we don't think a lot of people are ready for that kind of diet yet.
Probably yet.
Yeah, and that's why I think a carnivore diet or something like it is kind of an easy place to start. Because, like, hey, do you like steak and eggs? Well, we're going to get you on that for a couple weeks. Get you kind of used to eating less food. We're going to get used to eating less food. Then we're going to add in some protein ice cream. Then we're going to add in some, some of these things that he makes that are delicious, right? I would love to do that. But I think that if I went with a lot of people from a standard American diet right into making protein ice cream, that ice cream is going to quickly devolve into real ice cream.
Probably.
And I think that that's what we see. I mean, that's what I see for myself is that when I do that kind of diet, I'm always constructing these things and they start out being low calorie, but then they end up kind of being high calorie. Like even with the popcorn, remember I told you, oh yeah, I've been eating popcorn.
Right.
Well, I started out with one bowl of popcorn. I ended up having 3 giant bags of popcorn every single day and I couldn't control myself. That's me. I mean, that's how I've always been, So if I stick to meat though, somehow I'm full and satiated. And then in my head, I've cut off that idea of even eating popcorn.
Right.
Like I've just cut it out. Like I don't do that anymore.
Right.
So since I've cut that out, I think if I went and had some popcorn now, like say I had some tonight, I'm not gonna because it's World Carnivore Month, but just say I did, I don't think I'd have 3 bags now. I think for me, things ebb and flow in a way where I still have problems controlling myself.
Something that your brother said to me once. One time Mark said to me, he goes, everybody that's holding any sort of level of fitness and leanness is on a program. No one's getting there just blindly walking their way through it naturally in life. Most people
There's a few people that are genetically gifted, but it's very few that don't have to do much of anything. Even guys like Callum Von Moger, I don't know if you're aware who he is, but he's jacked and shredded, or Bradley Martin. I bet you they work at it way more than they let on even. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you got to remember that too. They're probably working on it all the time.
And when I think of Bradley Martin, I think of a guy that's probably on a pretty solid program. I mean, he's always talking about
it's all about habits.
Stay lean and all that sort of stuff.
You don't deadlift 700 pounds just like not lifting every day. He lifts all the time. He trains all the time. He eats good probably most of the time. And then like a lot of times with these influencers, you'll see him out at In-N-Out Burger or something, eating a 4x4, and you're like, oh, easy for them to do. They're shredded. But like you have to understand that they're kind of like Mark, where Mark can eat something like that and kind of cruise right past it because he's in such good shape that it doesn't matter. And
are you paying attention to this next wave of fitness influencers, to the Bradley Martins or to the Hello Mark Harley, or to like these new and upcoming like fitness personalities? Do you think they're putting a lot of good in the world? Are they preaching the same sort of like get healthy, get right, or are they just sort of being fun and and interesting to look at.
I think more of them. I was talking to Stan Efferding about this, and I think I was like, "Why don't bodybuilders know about the carnivore diet?" He's just kind of shook his head and like, "I don't know either," And people are starting to get wise to the vertical diet, and I think some people are starting to get wise to the carnivore diet. But I think the carnivore diet's a tool that every bodybuilder should know about. I would love for Greg Doucette to talk about it, but he probably thinks it's stupid because it's not his thing, right? So like, I don't know what he thinks of it. I would love to hear Greg Doucette actually honestly talk about it, because if you honestly look at the people that are leading the charge on a carnivore diet, it's me, my brother, Dr. Sean Baker, and we're all lifting a lot of weight. We're moving a lot of weight around. We're really strong. We're not losing. People talk about, oh, well, it's going to sap your strength and this isn't good for a strength athlete. Let me put Hafthor Bjornsson on my version of a carnivore diet and let me show you how it will not kill his strength. Like, there's no way. You're telling me he's going to be weak because he's not eating carbs? Like, no, there's no way. We're going to give him enough fat. And and I talked about this with Stan too. You might drop off with strength a little bit, but you're not going to drop off the map. You know what I mean? And I think that's what people are worried about. You're not gonna, and then once you drop off a little bit, you may be like me where you actually come back stronger. I feel I'm way stronger on a carnivore diet than I am during my regular carbohydrate diet. And the reason is I'm in better condition. When I'm on a carnivore diet and I'm on it for weeks, my conditioning's good. I can go longer, so I can train harder. So for me, it's a good thing. For some people, they'll say, it's gonna, you need carbs to lift and blah, blah. I just think that's an excuse. I mean, look at some of these power lifters that are out there now. John Hack, who's like, 25 years old and deadlifting like 800 pounds. I believe if we put him on an all meat diet, he could still do the same savage lifts. Now, his lifts may go down a little bit, but what if we were to supply him with carbohydrates around his workouts? I don't think his lifts would go down at all. So right. I think there's more to all of this that people need to learn about. Like, I think some of these newer influencers, they need to learn more about fasting. They need to learn more about things like a carnivore diet, and they need to implement these things so they have a more well-rounded approach to fitness, not just like, hey, cut your calories and eat this, this, and this for the rest of your life. I just think my diet forever will be cyclic. Like, I will not be on a carnivore diet forever. I will not be on a keto diet forever. I will not be on a anabolic circle diet forever. I'm going to be on a combination of all of those diets. And that's how Mark and I like to work our nutrition throughout the year, is to cycle things through.
There's a lot that makes a lot of sense. The cycle with the year.
Well,
doesn't it?
And not cycling on purpose, just like cycling by how you feel. Like, how do I feel? Well, I feel like, you know what? I'm sick of this carnivore diet. That's how I got like over the summer. I'm sick of this. I just want to eat rice. I want to eat rice. I want to get stronger. And so you always think the grass is always greener on the other side. So I thought that when I ate rice, that my lifts were going to go through the roof, and they didn't. I was on the same TRT that I'm on now. They didn't go through the roof. They got better as I went on carnivore. And I know a lot of people will say, wow, it's not scientific. But I don't know what to tell you. I personally perform better on a carnivore diet. I think Dr. Baker performs better on his carnivore diet than he did before.
And now he's probably like what you call fat adapted. Like,
it's
your
great.
Body gets better at burning the fat.
And thank you for bringing that up, Russell, because it used to be when I first talked to Dom D'Agostino back about 5 years ago. I remember being on the phone with him. I was actually driving to Sacramento to visit Mark, and I couldn't believe I was talking to him. I'm like, oh my God, this is Dominic D'Agostino. This is the guy that's been on keto for like 7 years, and he's been on Joe Rogan talking about it. And my first question to him is like, can you be on a ketogenic diet for more than a year? Or for more than like a couple months? And he was like, oh, I've been on it for 7 years. And to me, that was the breakthrough. Like, that conversation with D'Agostino, that was the breakthrough that I had, that I needed, because I said, I've done these diets all through college. When I talked about it on Joe Rogan, I was the first person to ever bring up a carnivore diet in the history of Joe Rogan's podcast, I think.
Wow.
Because I said it like even years before I ever met Dr. Baker. I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I used to just eat meat and water. I didn't call it a carnivore diet. But when I brought that up and Mark and I talked about it, he said, why didn't you do that for a long time? And if you go back and watch that episode, it said, because I didn't think I could I didn't think it was sustainable. And then when D'Agostino told me, oh no, it's totally sustainable, you could do this for years, I'm like, I'm in. You know, that's where the War on Carbs was launched. Like literally like that trip. I think that trip when I came up to Sacramento, I think I told Mark, like, let's launch a War on Carbs. I was just joking around. We were at a sushi place. And I said, you know, they have a war on drugs. We might, and it didn't work, but let's start a war on carbs and make it work. And then we toasted, we ordered sushi, and we had like these little bowls of rice. And I pushed the bowl of rice aside, and I picked up the piece of sashimi, and I said, here's the War on Carbs. And Mark and I toasted a piece of sashimi together. And he's like, to the War on Carbs, boom. And then that's when it was born. And what was really great was that we promised, like, I'm like, okay, from here on in, no carbs. So I lived in LA at the time, and I went back home. And I went for 49 days without a single carbohydrate. And I was really, really, really strict. And I called Mark, and I'm like, you're still like, you know, the war on carbs, it rages on. And he's like, oh, no, I've been eating carbs again. And I'm like, what? He's like, I just did like 30 days. And I'm like, I did 49 days. I'm like, I'm on day 49. And then Mark's thing was, are you where you want to be? And I said, no. And he said, then just keep going. And that's where we really, you know, got onto all this different things. Like even with the carnivore diet, at first Mark thought it was kind of stupid. Boar, what is he doing? Blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden he's like, wait a second. Boar has 2 fake hips, and now he's deadlifting again. What is he doing? How is that working? And then Mark's like, I need to do this, you know? And then he hopped on it. And when he hopped on it, you know, he always takes everything to a new level. You know, he hopped on it, and he just looked awesome as soon as he started doing it. And he realized like the value and the power of it. And we started pushing it to the moon because we just think, look, Mark said it on his latest post. I just want you to try it. I just want people to try it, but I don't want them to try it for 2 days. I want them to give it a fair shot for 30 days and see how you really, really feel. And I don't want you to try it where you're starving yourself and you're locking yourself in a closet to stay away from food. I want you full bacon, eggs, bone broth, beef, turkey, you know, chicken wings, whatever you want to eat. Just go kill it and see how you can do on it. Because like I said, you can't eat plants on the carnivore diet. So you can't have chicken wings that are deep fried in oil because that's not part of the plan. But you could have chicken wings deep fried in beef fat if you wanted to, which actually would be delicious. I haven't tried that yet. You know where they have them? Actually, this is actually interesting, and I actually might go there because of this. They do have them fried in beef tallow at Buffalo Wild Wings.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's how they make their wings.
But all of them are just a special order?
All of them.
All of them?
Yeah, all of them are. So you have to get them naked without the breading, because I think they do offer breading also. Right. And you get them like naked, and then I'm pretty sure we can look that up, but I'm pretty sure that Buffalo Wild Wings does all theirs in animal fat, which totally makes me want to go there now. Like, sorry, podcast listeners, Russell and I are leaving to go to Buffalo.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Buffalo Wild Wings. You know, one of the things I wanted to talk about this week, because it is here we go, allergen and preparation guide. What do we got here? Fried and beef shortening. See it? Right there, preparation. Fried and beef shortening right here. Preparation. Go over, Russell, to the right of where you are.
There it is. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. So, hey, you know what? We're going, Russell. Me and you.
That's great.
Let's go to lunch. We're out of here. See you later.
Wild Buffalo. We're out.
So, one of the things I actually wanted to bring up, I was going to bring it up in the beginning, but I'll bring it up now, is the passing of, it's going to sound funny because people don't think that this is a guy that would be really instrumental in my life, but the passing of the late, great Bob Saget was really sad to hear about this week. And so I have a Bob Saget story for you. So Bob Saget, if you don't know, was on Full House and America's Funniest Home Videos, but he actually was like a really dirty comedian and really, really funny. So I would suggest that you go online and check out some of his old stuff, especially when he's talking about his dad and how much of a pervert his dad was and stuff like that. He's very, very funny. But Bob Saget, if it wasn't for Bob Saget, I don't think any of this that we have going on right now would be going on. And the reason I tell you this, Russell, is that Bob Saget was the judge for a contest I entered when I was 19 years old. So when I was 19 years old, I made a music video for my friends. They were in a hip-hop rap group. And because we were from Poughkeepsie, they rapped about being Hicks from the Sticks, basically. And they were good. And they worked with LL Cool J's producer, Marley Marl, and different people like that. So they were like about... So you know the song Informer by Snow? Oh, Informer, da 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 da, whatever he sings, lick your boom boom down, whatever like fucking say. I don't even know what they say. But anyway, so they were like on the same label as that guy. Like they were getting ready to be launched, right? And they had this cool gimmick before Kid Rock ever sang about being a cowboy. They were singing about being Hicks from the Sticks, you know? And so I made a video for my friends, and a music video. And it was a music video. We were like out on a farm with cows and doing like, it's ironic that I'm doing a carnivore diet now. We're like out with these cows and like, you know, they're doing all these crazy hip hop dances like out in the middle of fields. And it was just funny. It was like, what is this? But it was also a really good rap song. And so I made a video for them. And that video, my professor, so I went to Dutchess Community College in Poughkeepsie, New York. And I went there on a not a bet from my dad, but on a what do you call it? Ultimatum from my dad. My dad said, Chris, you don't have good grades. You're not very smart. You need to figure out something to do with your life, and you either need to go down to the city of Poughkeepsie tomorrow and fill out a job application and be a garbage man or a postman or something where, you know, you work for the city or the town, because those are jobs that you'll have for the rest of your life. And it's something I think you can do. And with your grade level, I mean, your grades are terrible. I had a 68 GPA, like out of 65 is passing. And out of like 500 students, I think I was ranked like in the 490s in my high school graduating class. I went to a big high school.
I relate to that.
So I went to a community college called Dutchess Community College, and I went into the video production program because I'm like, this is where I can screw around the most. Like I get to Mark and I used to make skits all the time. We used to mess around with a video camera and make skits, and my grandfather was always filming stuff on like a Super 8 camera. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start making skits, and I'm going to like see if I can turn it into something. Back then, there was nothing. There was no YouTube. There was nothing. So I would make skits, and the way that we would show them would be at like family gatherings. I'd get everybody around and like pop in a fart skit, and they would be hilarious though. And my family would just die laughing. Like, these are great. And I had all different kind of skits, and I wanted to write for Saturday Night Live. Like I had all these big ambitions. Like, oh, I want to write comedy. I want to do things that make people laugh, or you know, whatever. So I filmed this music video for my friends. And my professor saw it, and I actually spent every single weekend that everybody else was out partying and doing other stuff. I spent every single weekend in the editing room for like 2 months, learning how to edit. And back then it was linear editing. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, it means that you're editing from tape to tape. So you're taking one videotape and editing pieces of it onto another videotape, which means if you mess up, you have to do it all over again. You can't fix something later on. You have to like lay it, and this is how editing used to be done. And it's why editing in movies used to be better before. Like, I wish we went back to linear editing, because if it was harder to edit stuff now, things would be way better. You would put the time in pre-production. You'd put the time in planning. You wouldn't go, let's just fix it in post, because you couldn't. You would think about things before you did them, and you would think about things as you shot them. And so because it was like this linear editing thing, it took me forever to edit this music video. But I got it all done, and I showed it to my professor. My professor just shook his head, and I thought he was mad. Like, I thought he was going to be like, and he was foreign. His name's Camilo Rojas. He's like, Chris, you are at completely different level. Completely different level. You don't belong here. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean I don't belong here? And he's like, you belong in Hollywood. And he's kind of like basically said, you need to enter this. I'll speak English now because I don't do a very good Portuguese accent or whatever he had. Venezuelan he was. He said, you need to go to a big school and you need to go to like film school. He's like, you're way too good at this. I'm like, really? And he's like, I want you to enter this in this contest. And so I'm like, I enter this contest. It's called the American Film Institute Visions of the U.S. contest. And it's sponsored by Sony and the American Film Institute. Okay, well, I'll enter this contest. Well, guess what? There was 800 videos, music videos that got sent in. There were different categories. It was like dramatic, music video, blah, blah. And this is for like amateur young filmmakers. I'd say about 90% of the entries that they got were shot on Betacam at the time, which was like the top of the line equipment with all the news used. I shot mine on VHS and I beat everybody. And I didn't find out until I won the contest. And I called. I thought my mom called me and told me that I won this contest. And I thought she was kidding because my mom was known to embellish things and like make you feel good. It's like, hey, honey, you like won this contest and they want you to fly to California. I'm like, what? And so I fly to California, right? When I get to California, I find out, I didn't know any of this. I get to California and I find out, and I'm with my friends, we find out the contest was judged by Bob Saget, who I met. And Bob Saget said, hey, man, have a seat. I really want to talk to you. He's like, your video, it wasn't just funny. It was like funny and it was really creative. And what I want to tell you is that it probably doesn't mean a lot coming from me. I'm just a stupid comedian. And he's like, but Francis Ford Coppola saw your video. And the second he saw it, and he's like, you know, he was a judge, right? And I'm like, no. He's like, the second Francis Ford Coppola saw it, he said, that's the winner. And he's like, I just wanted to tell you that. And he got up and walked away. I think I cried because I didn't know what else to do.
That's incredible.
And I'm like, you know, when I was young, I loved The Godfather. I loved Francis Ford Coppola's movies. Like even just the visual, like Dracula is a weird movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, but the visual production of Bram Stoker's Dracula is like one of the most visually compelling movies of all time. And I was like, man, that is so crazy. But then because Bob Saget said, you probably won't care, it made me care about him. Like it made me love him because he was self-deprecating in the moment.
Right.
And I remember like that whole, I think it's the only time, to tell you the truth, that I've ever interacted with Bob Saget was when he told me that.
What year is this, Chris?
I want to say 1992 or 92, I think. And so just meeting Bob Saget was awesome. But it was what he told me that really like inspired me to go to film school. That's what I'm saying. Like he had a huge impact on my life. Like when he said, you're the guy and you need to know that, like, I feel like he was sent to tell me for a reason, you know, like for a bigger reason, like you need to go do something with this. And so what was really crazy is that I applied to USC film school and I was like, well, I'll never get into USC film school. People told me that I would never get in. When I went back to Dutchess Community College, I told people, I went to look at USC and I'm thinking of trying to go to school there. And literally people laughed in my face. They're like, you're not going to go like get into USC. It's the best film school in the country. And I'm like, I know. I went to visit and it has George Lucas's. I was so excited. I was like, I had George Lucas's name on the side. It says George Lucas Instructional Film School. I'm like, how amazing is that? Like he was at that school. And I'm like, there's a Steven Spielberg soundstage. And I'm like, how exciting is that? He didn't even get into that school, and he still gives them money because he thinks it's so good, you know? And Steven Spielberg ended up going to Long Beach, which obviously did not hurt him at all. But what I wanted to say is that everybody laughed at me, told me like I wasn't getting there. But when I was going through my application process, I just remember what Bob Saget told me. You belong there. Like, you fucking belong there. Don't let anybody tell you that you don't belong there. And so I just went through with the application, you know, kind of being stupid. Like, I'll just be, you know, whatever. And did the whole application. I sent it into USC Film School. Never heard back from them. I'm like, I guess I'm never going to hear back, I guess. But I guess it just takes a long time, actually. So I called the school. And my dad called the school, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And like, oh, we haven't made our final decisions yet. Okay, blah, blah. And I'm like, but my dad was like, I just want to check and see if you have all the information that Chris sent. Like, he sent an essay, he sent his application, and he sent the letters of recommendation. And they said, oh, Mr. Bell, we know. We know. And my dad's like, what? And they're like, yeah, he's the one that got the letter from Francis Ford Coppola. And my dad was like, what? He's like, he's got a letter of recommendation from Francis Ford Coppola. Like, yeah, we know who he is. And my dad was like, did you know Francis Ford Coppola wrote you a recommendation letter? I'm like, no. And so the woman who was running the contest, her name's Lee Briggs. I don't know if she's still alive or out there, but hopefully she is. And she said to me, oh, I had Francis write a little note. I figured it would help. And so like the people that helped me along the way all kind of had to go back to Bob Saget, so I just, figured I would bring him up and memorialize him in a way that's kind of weird.
That's a beautiful story, Chris.
But I'll never forget that dude. Like, I'll never forget when people were making fun of him for doing America's Funniest Home Videos, saying he's not funny. I'm like, no. I would always defend him. People are like, why do you always defend Bob Saget? I'm like, because he means a lot to me, And he did. He meant a lot to me. And so what I was just thinking about the other day is like, or yesterday when he passed, is how much of an impact that guy actually had on the world. Like, people love Full House. So whether or not it's, a popcorn kind of show and a popcorn kind of comedy that he did, like America's Funniest Home Videos was corny. It was cheesy. But that guy must have made so much money. And think of how many people he entertained. He was an entertainer. Like, he basically used his dirty jokes to get on this bigger platform and like entertain the world. And I think that it's a beautiful thing if you can do that.
Yeah.
So here's the Bob Saget.
Rest in peace, Bob Saget.
Yeah. And I saw like Rogan had posted a thing about him, and I just thought like, it's like that guy was loved, he was and I do encourage people to actually go and watch his regular stand-up stuff, because some of it's really, really good and really funny and really raunchy, which you don't always think about. So, and at that same time that I met Bob Saget, literally a couple months after I met Bob Saget, I was on my first carnivore diet. So
there you go.
All these things come back around again.
He brought you to LA, kind of brought me to LA. Kind of like was a reason why. I wouldn't say like he brought me to LA, but like sure.
It was inspired by, he was part of the inspiration between him, Francis Ford Coppola, and Lee Briggs. And I've never met Francis Ford Coppola. And I've like tried to get in touch with him. I've tried to like reach out, but it's like, how like you got to just meet the guy in order to meet the guy, like I have met George Lucas. I met him at a film festival when I did my first film, Billy Jones, that got into the Aspen Film Festival. And when I got it was an Aspen Comedy Arts Festival. And they were doing a like anniversary for American Graffiti, which is a George Lucas movie. And one of the few movies that George Lucas ever made. He made that in Star Wars and THX 1138, which I have another story about. So he, I don't know, man. It was weird. I met George Lucas. And I went up to him and I'm like, hey, man, how you doing? Like I acted like I knew him. And I said, hey, so what got me over with him, though, was like he was kind of like taken aback, like, who's this guy? And then I said, hey, I go to USC Film School. And I was shaking his hand while I said it. And he said, oh, that's great. And I said, yeah, thanks for the building. And he just started dying laughing. He thought it was funny. He thought it was a good one. And so I talked to him for a little bit and he just asked me like what I was into and whatever. It wasn't much of a thing, but it was pretty cool to meet George Lucas. And this is before he made the Phantom mistake, I call it, the Phantom Menace, before he ruined all the Star Wars. So I was actually still really high on him. I thought, he was an awesome dude when I met him. I still think he's awesome. But so anyway, my THX story, that's amazing. This is just name dropper city today, right? Okay. But when I first went to USC Film School, the very first day, I walked into the Norris Theater, which is still there on USC campus. It's this beautiful theater with perfect acoustics. I remember, like, the one thing I remember about it, it's the only movie theater where you could actually get up and walk down the aisles without asking people to move. Like, they were smart enough to space out the seats so that you could actually get up and walk and have an aisle in front of you. And I had all my big film classes in that room. It's probably about a 400-seat theater. But it's like really nice and spaced out. The seats are really comfortable, and the seats are all set up with like this certain weird kind of like cloth on them. It's almost like not like a neoprene, but it's a different kind of weird cloth, and it's all for acoustics, so that it sounds good. And you're thinking like, what? This is a weird theater. Why is it so acoustically perfect, right? Well, it's because it was designed by Tom Holman. And so the very first day, and I'll explain who Tom Holman is, but basically the very first day of class, I walk in the classroom, some like teaching assistant comes out and said, hey, welcome to the USC film school, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then like the lights go down and they start playing the first 10 minutes of Star Wars. And then this other dude walks out and he goes, hey, my name is Tom Holman. I'm your professor. If you probably haven't heard my name, but you probably know my name. They call me THX. And he's like, they call me THX because I invented the Tom Holman experience, which is THX sound.
Wow.
And I'll be your professor. And the reason I showed you the first 10 minutes of Star Wars is I want to show you how I designed the sound for it. So now we're going to play the first 10 minutes of Star Wars with just the production sound. And then we're going to go back and we're going to watch that first 10 minutes again with some effects layered in. And it was so cool. Like, we got to see the entire process of how he created like the first 10 minutes of noise for Star Wars. And you think like, oh yeah, laser beams. They're just like laser beam noise. They must be like, you know, electronic noises. It's literally a guy. You know, you see like a telephone pole, and then you see the wire that's grounding the telephone pole, and it's just like a big steel cable going to the ground.
Yeah.
Right? It's a guy hitting that with a hammer and recording it out in a field somewhere. And like them taking that into the studio and putting reverb on it and putting different sounds to it and making it go pew, 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 pew. So it's like all these noises that you hear, he was showing like how they got them, how they made them. You know, we learned about everything to do with sound. And when you learn about the stuff and you peel back the curtain and you realize like when somebody gets their head squashed in, it's probably a watermelon on a soundstage. It's really crazy. Like, you know, they call them Foley artists, and Foley artists are like, they make all the noises. And so you think like, oh yeah, somebody just has a sound effects library. Where do you think they get those sound effects? They record them, but 9 times out of 10, it's not what you like. They can't bring somebody's skull in and bash it to make the sound. So they gotta like take a watermelon and smash it, but a watermelon's too soft, so they gotta put a little crunch in there. So maybe it's like part of a car accident mixed with a watermelon, and it sounds like, you know, like it's really crazy how they make and do all these things. But you know, that was the one thing about USC that was really cool, is you got to see behind the curtain.
What a great story, man. That's really neat.
Yeah, I have a bunch of crazy film school
I imagine.
stories. You know what's great is I was film school is like the first day you walk into class and you meet all these kids. And you can just imagine the kind of kids that go to film school. Like, there are kids that wear berets. There are kids with long trench coats. You have all, like, any type of stereotype that you picture in a film school, they're there. The one stereotype that you don't picture in film school is a power lifter who has a mohawk. And that's who I was when I first went there. I was a power lifter with a mohawk. And the day before my first day of school, like the Sunday before my first day of class, I had a powerlifting meet. And I squatted 650 in my powerlifting meet. And I completely blew out my eyeballs. So my eyeball, you ever seen somebody blow out their capillaries in their eyes? My eyes were completely bloodshot, like completely red, like deep, deep red. Like the whites of my eyes were dark red. And then on my face was all these like little dots because I blew all the blood vessels in my face squatting 650.
Wow.
So I squatted 650, I benched over 4, and I deadlifted around 550 at that meet because I think I was grizzled from the big squat. So I did really good. I won the powerlifting meet. And then like the next day we had to get up in front of the class and tell the class about ourselves, you know? So I had to get up in front of the class and tell them why my face was all, you know what I mean? Like I was probably, I don't know. It was weird because like I was friends with everybody in the film school from like day one. Like everybody knew who I was because I think I was so different. So I think it was actually great to be different and weird and then go to a school of eclectic, weird people who are all like, we love that guy. He's the only guy that doesn't smoke cigarettes. You know, why doesn't he smoke cigarettes? Oh, because he's into like he's into that health stuff. Like he's a power lifter. But it was fun and it was really cool. And like some of the people that I've went to film school with have gone on and do huge things. I love The Mandalorian. my friend Rick, his nickname is 5 Minutes. So Rick is this black guy I went to film school with. He's awesome. He had the deepest voice. And the reason I call him 5 Minutes is we used to show films. Like we had to show our own films every week. And after you would show your film, you had 20 minutes to talk about it. But the teacher always wanted a 5-minute warning. And Rick was always the guy that would do the warning because he had like the deep voice. And so we'd be like, everybody be talking, discussing this person's movie. And then you hear 5 minutes, And he was just this dude that I loved. He played basketball at USC also. And Rick Famuyiwa, you can look him up. He he ended up directing The Mandalorian, 3 episodes. But he also directed a movie called The Wood. He's directed, oh man, that's really hard. Famiyiua, I believe. Oh, it came up. Go back. FAM. See, Rick Famuyiwa. Rick Famuyiwa.
You understand this means that Google's listening to
Yes, 3 down. Rick Famuyiwa.
I mean, that's just too simple.
Yeah, there he is, Mr. 5 Minutes. That's my man right there. Another kid, interesting guy that I went to film school with, really interesting. One of the smartest guys that I've met. Richard Kelly, who did a movie called Donnie Darko that you might have heard of. Donnie Darko was a huge hit.
Yes,
huge
that
cult
has
hit. The rabbit, the weird rabbit in it.
Weird rabbit. Who's the kid that the actor?
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yes, he's phenomenal.
Yeah,
that guy's incredible.
So I have a great story about Richard Kelly. Ready for more name dropping, Russell? This is getting fun. Actually, I like talking about this stuff. So my friend Richard Kelly. Oh, Donnie Darko. There we go. And my friend Richard Kelly did Donnie Darko. Well, my friend Rich, he lived in Venice Beach. And I'd see him around. He'd go to the Mecca. He'd go into the Mecca and train. And he knew that I was friends with this guy named Dwayne Johnson. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Don't know.
And he knew that I trained at the gym with him. And like, it was weird because the only reason I was friends with Dwayne Johnson, a.k.a. The Rock, is because I used to work at Gold's. And used to sell memberships. And I gave The Rock and his cousin Tunaway and his brother-in-law Hiram, who is now an executive producer on all of The Rock's movies. Hiram, Tunaway is The Rock's stunt double. I gave them all a free membership to Gold's because I worked there. And I just gave them a free membership. For whatever reason, they were super grateful forever. Like, they'd hang out with me. We'd go to lunch together and hang out and stuff. And so Rich Kelly was telling me, hey, I'd really love to get Dwayne in this movie. And the movie was called, go on Rich Kelly, it's called Southland Tales. It's on there, on his IMDb, Southland Tales. I'd really like, see, there's Dwayne right there. He's like, I'd really like to get The Rock in this movie that I'm doing, And so I said, well, I'm like, I can't make that happen, but I can get you in front of him. And I'm like, but I recommend that you just go see him when he's around. Like you just come to the gym, like you just meet him through me. I'm like, I think screw all the agents suck, and all that. I was telling him, I'm like, you got to just meet him and tell him your passion because he's like really cool. Like he's a really great guy. I think he'll listen to you. And so Rich is like, all right, well, how's that going to happen? I'm like, I don't know, but just stand tight. We'll make it happen. And I go to lunch with The Rock one day, and The Rock goes to the bathroom, and I call Rich. I'm like, dude, get over here now to the Firehouse restaurant right now. Get over here now.
This is now. It's the moment.
Rich comes over. He comes over, and I'm like, hey, Dwayne, I know you've met Rich before because he met him at the gym before. And so I know you met Rich. He wanted to talk to you about this awesome project. I mean, he's one of the best filmmakers I know, blah, blah, blah. And so I sat there for the first 5 minutes of the conversation. I said, oh, you know what? I got to get going. But I didn't have to go anywhere. I just left on purpose. And I left them there. And then 2 days later, Rich is inviting me to come to the set to hang out with them on Southland Tales. Like, hey, come to the set. We're shooting,
Sometimes I think a good second.
Now,
Go ahead, tell me.
really quick.
Please.
I think that movie was really cool. It's really hard to understand, and it's really weird. And I think people should go back and watch it. It's a really weird movie. But it kind of bombed. And then I felt great that I helped The Rock get in it. But then I'm like, does The Rock now hate me because that movie bombed? I don't think so. But it just was always a funny, thought in my head is like, I got The Rock into a bomb. But who knows? Maybe 20 years later, this will have a cult classic, comeback.
You're obviously a trained director, but
I sometimes feel like you'd also be a really good producer, because you seem to be able to bring people together, and I've never heard anyone say anything bad about you. Like, people love you.
To tell you the truth, I'd rather be a producer. I think it's less pressure. I think I'm better at it. And I think you're kind of right. Like, I think if I went back to Hollywood now, like if I moved back to LA, I'm just going to be a producer. I'm just going to find shit and make it. Because, man, when you're driving the boat, they want a lot of work from you. Like when you want to direct something, they ask you to you really have to be a writer. And I realized that I don't, it's not that I can't write. I can write like crazy. I don't like to write. I don't like to sit there by myself and write. I like to talk to people. And that's what good producers do. They talk people into shit. One of my best friends in college, this is actually another, here we go. Let's drop some more names.
Let's end it on a good one.
Look up Trevor Engelson.
Okay.
So this is a guy, I think I told you about this. So my buddy Trevor Engelson's a producer, and he's got the ultimate gift of gab, and here's how I became friends with him. Mark and I always talk about, and this is something that people can carry through life. I actually just told my cousin this because my cousin's daughter just got into Alabama. I said, you got to tell your daughter when she goes to school to get a job where she has a position of power. My cousin's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, she needs to be like a manager for the football team, or she needs to be like work at a bar where she's like the manager of the school bar that everybody goes to, or she is, she's doing something that everybody needs to go through her. That way she'll have a position of power. That way she'll know everybody at the school. That way she can network, because she is good networking. She's like a really talky kind of good person as far as like a people person. And he was like laughing because he's like, I told him, I said, Mark and I always sought positions of power. Like if you're the bouncer, but you're the head bouncer, you're the guy that works the door. Like I worked the door at Sharky's, and Mark got a wife out of that, first of all, out of working at Sharky's. It's also crazy because we worked with John Cena at Sharky's. We worked the front door of Sharky's in Hermosa Beach. But I used to work at the 901 Club, which is like the school bar. It's called the 90, they used to call it, the USC school bar. Anybody that's gone there knows about the 90. This guy, Trevor, comes up to me the first day of school, and he's got this New York accent. And he's like, hey, he talked to me for a little bit, and he's like, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from New York. He goes, yeah, I could tell, and he's like, I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island, and he starts giving me this whole spiel. And he goes, look, man, I know you're probably good at your job and good at what you do. But if you let me in now, nobody's going to know the entire semester that this is a fake ID. So he gave me his fake Florida ID, and then he flat out told me, I know that you know that this is fake. I know that you're smarter than that. But I'm going to give you $20, which in school, that's a huge deal. It's like, whoa, that's like 3 meals.
This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean,
he gives me $20 in his ID, and he tells me, I know you know this is fake, but as long as you pass it, nobody else is going to question you. And I'm like, you know what? This motherfucker's right. And so I let him in. Well, we became good friends, and now he's a huge producer. He produced the show Snowfall on FX.
I love that show, by the way.
Great show about like the beginning of crack, And he was also married to Meghan Markle, which is crazy. They obviously got divorced, and she moved on to worse things than Trevor, because Trevor's the best. Like
he's the tip of the spear. It has to be downhill from him.
He'd kill Prince, whatever his name is, in a fight. Prince Harry?
I think so.
Yeah, he's from Long Island. He'd fucking kill that guy. You know what I mean? So, no, but Trevor's just like, he's one of the coolest guys I know. But someone's saying, like, the gift of gab, you can see why he's a good producer, because he produced himself into the bar before, anything ever happened. And it's funny it's funny how you can become friends with people, and how you can end up like bonding with people over something so stupid as in like, oh, this guy was smart enough to just talk to me like a human being, and he didn't get rejected. Meanwhile, I'm rejecting all of his friends. Like, sorry, you got to get lost. You can't, you can't work, can't come in here. Stuff like that. So Anyway, that's my school bar stories.
You crushed it. Those are good, those are good stories, man.
What are we doing on time here, Russell?
We're 120.
Oh man, I can just ramble forever.
You're got the gift, man.
I don't know if it's a gift or a curse.
Depends on which day of the week it is. I
But
suppose.
we should just call it a day for today, huh? We shouldn't really like kill these people with too much more name dropping.
That's a good
way to end it.
Of Better, Stronger, Faster cast.
Good way to end it. Well, I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to us ramble. We'll be rambling more about the carnivore diet and things that I've seen on it. Please send your questions into our Instagram. What's our Instagram, Russell?
BSFcast, all one word. Also on Twitter, DM either or.
At BSFcast. And Russell or I will see those messages and we will respond to them. So yeah, send us your questions, your comments, whatever you guys would like to see, and we will see you soon. Later.
Bye.